So this is July 13th, 2024, and we're on week 2 of Patrick Lecture 211, which is Outer Events Reflect Self-Creation. And I've been talking a bit with the participants and trying to unfold what we've just talked about today with a couple of other meetings this week, because it helps me understand what may need some more emphasis, and that's what I figure on addressing right now. So this week, the week before, we talked about different levels of consciousness. First level is this cause and effect thing doesn't make any sense to me. The second level is it's starting to make sense. I can see some connections. And the third is I know it's there. I may not have all the information. I may not be able to make all the connections, but I'm profoundly sure that the connections are there. So we're all on a trajectory. We're all on the range of these 3 stages of consciousness. When we start connecting the dots, that's when we start coming into the roadblocks. So what are the roadblocks? The first is that when we talk about outer events reflecting self-creation, the key word is reflect. I can't make the world do what I want it to do, no matter who I am, no matter how clean I am or how powerful I am. I don't control the world. This lecture is about how outer events are a reflection of what I am creating. So it's like there's a constant movement of energy that signals to the outside world and creates interactions that are reflective of where I am. It is not supposed to be a perfect science. It's not supposed to be a tit for tat. It is a way of seeing outer events as reflections and paying attention to them in a different way. Now, the idea I had was to compare this reflection to a funhouse mirror. When we have outer events being reflecting things to us, those outer events are being, they are done by beings. They are done by people, what people have created, the dynamics that have been created. The world is very busy. So the outer events that we are seeing have been created by other beings who have different beliefs, right and wrong, false and true. They have misconceptions and they have distortions. So for just a moment, if you can play with me, it's as if the mirror that we're seeing our self-creation reflected in is a funhouse mirror. It's distorted. And we're going to have to allow for the co-creation quality of life. And so I'm getting something reflected, but it's not gospel. It's not pure truth about me, about them, about anything. It has various levels of distortion in it. That's why over and over in the lectures, the guide suggests that we go get as much feedback as possible. Now, think in terms of world leaders who have advisors who are deeply devoted to them and or on their side and are advocates of the causes they espouse. The danger is that you don't have an alternative viewpoint. You don't have someone who sees things from a different perspective and can bring in other factors that have been discounted by the advisory group. When you go get feedback, it's most likely that you're getting feedback from your friends. Well, they were self-selected, and we self-select our friends and our acquaintances, even our living environments, so that they reflect things that we want to see, that we like to see, and they may not reflect what we don't want to see. So the phrase is, you hear what you want to hear, you see what you want to see. That's the danger in selective feedback. So the outer events are reflecting self-creation, but they're reflecting it with a number of distortions. So the more feedback you have, the more chances you are of being able to, I'm going to use the word triangulate. You're going to be able to figure out where the truth might be. Now, my joke is it's not in me. I don't have pure truth. You don't have pure truth. They don't have pure truth. There's a common knowledge that revolves around things where the truth's in there someplace. And by getting feedback and being honest with myself, I can get closer to that truth. That if I isolate myself or if I depend on someone else who has their own agenda. So you don't control the feedback you get. You don't control the distortions that are in that feedback or the misconceptions that are in that feedback. What you do control is who you listen to, how you listen to them, and what you do with that information. That you control. And that leads me to the second aspect that I was surprised by because I hadn't thought about it. And that is that some people interpret the word experience in this lecture as circumstance. The guy doesn't talk about circumstances, he talks about experience. What's the difference? Experience is how you perceive, feel, and react. It's all internal. My experience is not your experience. Now, here's the danger. Me and my friends may have similar experiences, but that doesn't mean that we have the same experience. It means that as we talk about it, our words are close enough so that we make a presumption that we're all experiencing something similar. May or may not be true. I am a Trekkie. I am a science fiction movie junkie and a Trekkie. And there are some examples of that in science fiction. Two of them were in Star Trek New Generation episodes that I posted for students. One was, the title was Ensigns of Command, about a race called the Sheliak, and the other was an episode called Darmak. Both of them dealt with the difficulty of communication. Now, in business, what I learned was don't give people information and they nod their head and you think you've communicated. Because the person may not know how to say no. They may be afraid to say no. They may think they can figure it out after they leave the room. So I think I've got it. I think I can handle it. They walk out the room. You don't know that they're going to be able to handle it. So that in business, I was taught that communication requires that you give information and then you check and find out what the other person got. What was their experience? What was their understanding? Say it to me in your own words, because if they parrot your words back, that's a memory trick that may have nothing to do with understanding. So in the science fiction episodes that I'm referring to, the idea was that it's actually extremely difficult to communicate. We have words that are loaded, coded, and charged that we have general understandings of. But when we throw those words back and forth, we may actually have uniquely subjective understandings of them. The first time I came across this as a teacher, I used the word seduction in teaching about something, and someone got upset because I thought I was sexualizing the material. And I've got to admit, I went numb for a moment. I just didn't understand what was going on. And then I realized that for some people, the word seduction is only used in the context of sexuality, whereas the word itself is quite broad. I looked it up. Seduction is about convincing someone to abandon their values. Now, if my value is chastity and you convince me to give it up and be promiscuous, you have seduced me. And I take that word and I make it bigger. I've done this my whole life. I got in trouble with my 7th grade English teacher about this because I used the word in an essay I wrote, a story I wrote about a woman, a rich woman who was very proud. The phrase I wrote was that she brandished her jewelry. And my teacher called me out on that. She said, no, brandish is only used for weaponry. And I said, I know that. And as a mature adult, my answer would be, it never occurred to you that women use jewelry as a weapon, that women use status as a weapon, that she wouldn't be announcing and pushing her status onto people. It's a social weapon. I was a kid, so I didn't have that ability to debate a teacher. But here's my point. The mirroring that we get is going to be imperfect. You're going to have to check it. You're going to have to not just say, ooh, that person gave me feedback, therefore I must give up what I think and go over here. This is a negotiation to some extent. You only change what you feel or think when you really believe that it's appropriate to do so. So feedback is useful, but it is not, I'm going to use the word gospel. It is not absolute truth. So the second thing that I was trying to communicate is that experiences are not circumstances. My experience of something can belie the circumstances. The circumstances can trigger a wide variety of responses in people. I'm still responsible for my experience, my reaction, my thought process. The invitation is to be aware that there are other experiences as well. So when you read this lecture and you see the word experience, please don't fall into the trap of thinking that that's a matter of circumstances and you can control them, because you don't get to do that. You don't control other people. The third thing that came up was, well, in connecting the dots, how do you know? Now, I'm one of those people that does crossword puzzles with a pen. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I just say that that's what I do. I don't religiously go find a pencil to do crossword puzzles when I do them. Which means that when I screw up, it's messy. It's really messy. I just like pens rather than pencils. How do you know when you've made a connection? To some extent, my invitation is to mentally, energetically do it with a pencil. Assume that you are going to test this out, that you've got a connection, you believe there's a reason, test it out, get some more feedback, try it out, engage with it, see how it feels. But if it doesn't work, erase it and change it. So when people say, how do I know? That's not that's not where the ball goes in the hole and we're done. How do you know is an organic, living, flexible process that's going to be changing and evolving. What you knew yesterday is added to by the experience of yesterday and today, and you may come to a new knowing today. So what I'm getting at is, in connecting these dots, you connect them, you try, you feel it, you explore it. If it doesn't work, you move it around, you change the connections. The knowing may be true in one moment, in one circumstance. It can even be true for a decade. And that may change. Society changes. I have noticed, for instance, that there have been a stunning number of social changes in the last 20 years. I have a movie collection, and some of these social changes involve how men and women interact and how families are raised. And when you realize that an old way of doing things was limited, it was prejudiced, it was disrespectful. What I found one day was I realized that a lot of the old movies that I had enjoyed actually have social problems built into them. They're not as funny as they used to be. They're not as cute. I can't relax and see them as easily as I could because we as a society have evolved. We don't beat our partners. We don't beat our children. We don't have institutionalized racism, prejudice, jokes about different people, different styles of living, different preferences. They're not funny anymore. And we need to move with that knowledge. We have to move our knowing forward and accept that some old jokes don't work anymore. So the knowing has got to be elastic. It is not a solution. It's an ongoing process. So that the connecting the dots, just to beat this over the head, has got to be done with a pencil. Now, the last thing that has come up is, but I don't understand. Okay, so here's my illustration. This is what I use. I'm holding up a picture, put this in the center for a second. Some people have mobile phones. This is a picture of a sailboat where you've got wind blowing in one direction, but it's got over the side a bucket. It's the old-fashioned way of having a sea anchor. And the sea anchor pulls the boat backwards. It's startlingly effective. And so you've got forces going one way and forces going one way and forces going the other. And this is why you can believe that you want to make forward motion, but you're not making any progress. And the reason for that is you've got an unconscious energy that is contrary to where your conscious mind believes you should go. In that particular sentence that I just said, it's should. And that, of course, is the danger signal. Is the should is society says I should, my mother says I should, my friends, my family says I should. The question is, do I want to? And if I don't want to, for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, false, true, pure, or full of negative intent, I don't want to, it won't get done. I will, to some extent, sabotage the going forward. So I'm going to go back to the title. Outer events reflect self-creation. Your outer reality is going to reflect your inner reality. Your inner reality may have some unconscious elements in it. Those are hard to find. They can be found, but they're hard to find. And it takes work. And that's why this work can't be taught in schools and it can't be assigned to people. You've got to be willing to go through so many details of your life and your thought process. It's exhausting sometimes. But that's the only way you're going to find all these elements, because you're really cleaning house. I tease people a lot that society says you're an adult at 21. We want to be an adult when we're 17. Society says we're an adult by 21. Most people accept that 20s are not the most mature part of our lives. So we get to the 30s, the 40s. That's where spiritual work starts. Why? Because the things that have worked don't need any more work. But some things haven't worked. Some things weren't addressed. Some parts of us were not cared for. And what we are doing in general in pathwork is we're more mature adults. We're older than 20, usually. And we're doing some very, very careful fine tuning. Now that can feel like changing your whole life, but it's not as much as we might think it is. It's just that we've built up some superstructures, some professions or relationships or living conditions that really don't fit. And the best way out sometimes is to break these. They don't speak of that lightly. The guide does not speak of breaking relationships lightly. So I like to keep it on as small a scale as possible, so that if you have a friend and your friend, you felt very close to them for a period of time, and now you don't. That it may be that that friend met your needs for a period of time, and then things changed, and you weren't aware that the change was occurring, but you're aware now that it doesn't work. And that's a form of knowing. Now, we can be upset and angry about that because we don't know how we got there. But it's still a knowing. The day we say this isn't working, or it needs to be changed or adjusted. And so what I'm advocating is we'll need to honor the knowing, but also honor that other people aren't always ready to hear that we have a new knowing, especially if we have not telegraphed this, if we have not communicated, if we've kept silent about these changes that have gone on. And this is why a radical change in outer events is sometimes necessary, because the inner has changed so much that the outer no longer serves. So hopefully that will add something to connecting the dots. Thanks for listening. This is about Patrick Lecture 211. Outer events reflect self-creation. And I always hope and advocate that you will read the lecture.